Well, hello and happy Wednesday, everyone. Happy Veterans Day. I hope you are all doing well in these insane times that we are living through. It can certainly be very stressful. So, hopefully, this session will give you a little bit of something to think about on a positive note, even though the topic itself definitely seems quite pessimistic, I should say. I mean, we're talking about Salesforce project failures, how they happen and how you can avoid them. And that can certainly be a source of tremendous stress for everyone. But hopefully, throughout the course of our discussion, and by the way, from my perspective, this is meant to be a discussion. Those of you who know me know that I am really not big on PowerPoint slides. I think they are way too scripted and canned. So I definitely have a couple of bullet points to share, but this is really meant to be sort of like an on the fly discussion with all of you. So please feel free to use the comment section, the chat section associated to this live feed to post your questions. By the way, we're streaming this right now on my Facebook group, my Brainy8 Facebook group, as well as on streaming it live on YouTube, as well as Periscope/Twitter. So comments might be coming in from pretty much everywhere. But anyway, I thank you for making the time to join us for this topic. So let's talk a little bit about Salesforce project failures. Now, this happens to all of us. And by the way, this happens to outside of the Salesforce world also. The things that I'm going to talk about are not particularly unique to the Salesforce ecosystem or the Salesforce platform, but they can be very challenging and they take on a slightly different flavor, a slightly different twist when it comes to the Salesforce platform. The other thing that I want to call out is a lot of times, most of my audience is Salesforce admins, not necessarily developers. It's primarily admins. And for most of us who are Salesforce admins, most of us did not necessarily wake up one day and say, that's my goal in life. I want to be a Salesforce admin and proactively pursue. Now, some of you might have, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But many people are who are admins today, many are accidental admins, meaning we were doing something else. We might have even had a totally different career that had nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with Salesforce. And by the bizarre way that the world works, the way the planets were aligned, not only did you find yourself responsible for Salesforce, you found yourself doing things you never ever thought you would be doing. Now, let's also talk about the part of the audience who has proactively selected. Some of you have woken up one day and said, I want to be a Salesforce admin. Usually the path to doing that is going on to Trailhead and learning Salesforce, preparing for the admin certification exam. Some of you have even taken my course to prepare for the admin certification exam. Taken the exam, get yourself certified, start looking for a job, and boom, you're a Salesforce admin. Well, when it comes to successfully running a Salesforce project, there are many skills and pitfalls and things to be knowledgeable about and things to be concerned about that have nothing to do with passing the admin certification exam. Have nothing to do with anything that you will find anywhere on Trailhead. What am I talking about? There are many issues associated with change management. There are many issues associated with project management. Many of us have never been trained in or properly trained in how to manage any project, let alone how to manage a technology project, how to manage an IT project, or change management. What is change management? Change management, think of from the perspective of, even for yourself or your loved ones, where you were using one kind of phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone, and all of a sudden there's a major update, and the operating system gets updated, and all of a sudden certain screens look completely different. All of us have gone a little bit out of whack. Like, oh my gosh, who moved my cheese? Ever hear of that book? Who moved my cheese? That's what this is all about. Where not everyone adjusts that quickly to changes that happen, let alone drastic changes. How many of us have been in Facebook even? 'Cause many of you are watching this, participating through Facebook. How many of you have gone on Facebook and all of a sudden, like, the navigation is slightly different. Like, features that used to be on the right-hand side are now on the left-hand side, or now on the top of the screen, or we can't find them anywhere. And for a lot of people, they get way bent out of shape. And everyone's knee-jerk reaction, usually 99% of the world, responds by saying, how do we just put it back? I liked it the way it was. I don't really care about the new things. So there's project management. There's change management. There are communication skills. Not all of us have necessarily been trained in how to properly communicate, especially in a corporate environment, especially when we are responsible for a project, especially when we are trying to communicate with or extract information from people that are far more senior than us within the organization. And then there's everything associated with what I'll lump into business analysis, which is essentially gathering business requirements. And a lot of people who are admins have never been trained in any of this. So a lot of different worlds, different philosophies, skills all come into play when you are a Salesforce admin that go above and beyond knowing how to create a field, a record type, an object, a page layout, a role, a profile, a permission set in Salesforce. So we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls and how you can go about addressing some of them. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm just looking real quick to make sure, because I see a bunch of comments have come in, just making sure there are no questions that I need to be mindful of. Okay, so the first reason why many Salesforce projects fail. By the way, if you can relate to any of these, if you have a comment, a question, a concern, go ahead and drop it in the comments below. Because like I said, this is meant to be interactive. The first reason, poorly defined outcomes, i.e. business requirements, or none at all. So what does this look like? I'm sorry for laughing. For a lot of these, I'm going to laugh. Because even though I've felt the pain of managing projects where a lot of these things have happened, all I could do really is laugh in retrospect, even though while it was happening, I was certainly pulling my hair out. And it's happened many times to all of us. Okay, poorly defined outcomes or business requirements. What does it look like? When you're sitting with someone who is asking for something in Salesforce, you're sitting with someone who's, let's say, in sales, and that person says, I would like to be able to track all of my tier 1 accounts and all of the deals that I have with my tier 1 accounts in Salesforce. And I want to get a notification when they're overdue. What does that even mean? That's like really vague. How do you define tier 1 accounts? Is there a field somewhere that has tier 1 accounts? What do you do exactly? What kind of notification? What is it that you would like to do with these accounts? What do you consider to be either due or overdue when it comes to a timeline perspective, like things that need attention? Like, based on what criteria are you talking about? So a lot of times, no matter what question you ask, they are the people that you're working with, the business folks that you're working with, they struggle to articulate what it is that they truly need. And instead of talking about the business processes, instead, what do? They give you technical specifications. Create a button that does the following. Create a report that does the following. So, for example, let's say someone asks you for a report that shows all of the customers in a New York City area that, let's say, have not had any task associated with those customers within 120 days. And without getting a better understanding of what the business requirements are, you're going to waste a lot of time and generate a lot of frustration go ahead and build that report. And now what are they doing? They make a printout of that report, or they export it into Excel, and they're starting to call all of these people, and they're marking it up in Excel or marking up on the printout. I kid you not, I have experienced this before with highlighters and pens and color coding on the printout. And then they hand you the stack of papers, or they hand you a digital Excel spreadsheet that's all color coded and all kinds of abbreviations on and notes on there, in like all crammed in on a particular field, on a particular column in the Excel spreadsheet. And they ask you if you can update Salesforce with all of their scribblings, whether they're digital scribblings or handwritten scribblings. So the better way to do it, and it requires a little bit of pushback, it requires a little bit of confidence on our side as the admin, where when someone is asking, whether it's for a report, or asking for a button, or asking for a field, or they're asking for a custom page of some kind, is pushing back and basically, in a polite and respectful way, asking them, what is it that you're trying to do exactly? What is the business problem that you're trying to solve for right now? Can you elaborate a little bit more? And more often than not, people are going to try to insist that just give me the frickin' button. Just create that report. Just give me that page layout. Now, depending on who it's coming from, depending on the political friction that may or may not exist between you and this other person, in the perfect world, you still need to push back a little bit and basically say, look, I can create you this button or this report or this custom page. But if you elaborate a little bit, just give me the courtesy of explaining, give me the background, the business process associated with whatever it is you're asking of me right now, I can probably help you above and beyond simply creating this button or page layout or report. Because it's possible that whatever it is that you're asking for, A, won't even help whatsoever, or B, will help incrementally, while if you elaborate a little bit more about what you're trying to do, I can give you a more holistic solution. Let's go back to the example I gave you before, which is incredibly simple. Like, we're not even talking about Salesforce configuration. Someone asks for a report of, let's say, all of their customers, all of the contacts within a specific geographic area that have not been touched in the last 120 days. If what they're looking to do is create a report so they can go make a printout and they can go start calling all of these people, because on the report they want the phone number field, and they're going to go ahead and start calling these people and scribbling down notes either in Excel or on the printout and starting to color code them, etc. What you really want to do is you want to create a campaign. You want to add those people into a campaign. And then you want to teach the end users how to leverage the list of all of the campaign members and log their phone calls directly in Salesforce so that everything is simple and clean and cohesive, and there's no data importing that needs to be done. There's no conversion that needs to be done of their gobbledygook, God knows what, how ugly their Excel spreadsheet might even look, to just dump all of that in Salesforce in some giant text field. So in the end, that's basically what it looks like. I'm just scanning. Take their crayons away. Yeah, definitely take their crayons away. So that's essentially what it looks like when we don't have properly defined business requirements. Now, what is it that we can do about it? As I mentioned a moment ago, push back a little bit. Sometimes you have to be gentle about it. Sometimes you have to be forceful about it. And I'll also say, I'll consider this sort of like going nuclear. I don't mean to be like dramatic or anything, where if they simply won't listen to you and they're insisting that they know better because they are the CIO, they are the head of sales, whatever it is, and they're insisting that you go ahead and you simply create whatever functionality it is that they're asking for, then my recommendation is, if you feel that you really can't push back anymore and they will simply not listen to you, go ahead and give them whatever they want, but beforehand, just sort of warn them in the nicest way that you can get across. So what I usually do is as follows. I basically turn to them and say, listen, I'm going to go ahead and create. I don't want to have this friction between you and I. I'm trying to help you. I'll go ahead and create that button, that report, that field, that custom page layout, whatever it is that you're asking for. I'm going to build it for you. I don't believe that's actually going to solve the problem that you think it's going to solve. And I'd like to help you explore another solution, but if you don't want to go there, that's fine. I'll go ahead and do it for you. Just don't be surprised if later on I look straight in your eyes and I say, told you so. But after it could be a couple of days, or it could be a couple of weeks, or it could be a couple of months, where you later turn to me and say, yeah, that thing I asked you to do, it didn't seem to really work. I'll be like, yeah, no kidding. Because I tried warning you, I tried helping you. But hey, if this is what you want to do, this is what we're going to do. I'll go ahead and build this wackadoodle thing that you're asking me to build right now. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Reason number 2 why projects fail. Lack of leadership, otherwise seen as uninvolved project sponsors. This happens very often. What does it look like? You have senior leaders within the organization. Now, senior leader, you could define it however you want. Sometimes the initiative around whatever project you're working on, sometimes it comes directly from the CEO. Sometimes it comes from the head of IT. Sometimes it comes from the head of sales. Whoever the highest level person is that's expected to be responsible, have the ultimate say on this particular project. That's who we're talking about. And so what does it look like if there's lack of leadership, if people are not involved? What it looks like is these people are not attending meetings. These people are not making key decisions. These people are not aligned with you to help and push back within the business users. When I say push back, it might be pushing back on forcing them to clean up their data, on forcing them to elaborate and clarify a little bit more on whatever it is that they're asking for, on forcing them to have more realistic expectations of what the system can do or can't do, forcing them to keep in line with the scope of the project. If you don't have leadership within actively involved at many, doesn't have to be all steps along the way. I'm not at all talking about like micromanaging. What I'm talking about is having whoever that leader is demonstrate to their team that they are aware of what's going on, they are involved in what's going on, and they are willing to step in and make key decisions and call people out for not being in line. That's really what's needed here. And this holds true for every phase of any Salesforce project. So this holds true when we're talking about the early stages of defining what the project includes and doesn't include, the project scope. This holds true as it relates to defining what the business requirements are in terms of configuring the system, in terms of having people test the system, in terms of reviewing the quality of the data, in terms of people actually logging in and using the system, people actually attending the training. And it's one thing to attend the training, to have a warm body in the seat, to just check off the box to say I attended the training. It's something entirely different when the people that you're trying to train, the end users who are expected to use the system, are not asking any questions whatsoever during any training session. That is a red flag that something is awry. And by the way, we're going to get to that a little bit more. But even in those situations, all it really takes is for a senior leader to get involved and to basically interject with the team and remind them, look, we're not trying to force them to have questions whatsoever, but to remind them that they are going to be held accountable, hint, hint, as to some other reasons why things go awry a little bit when it comes to Salesforce projects, that they're going to be held accountable. They're expected to actually use the system. They're expected to know how to use the system. That they're expected to put in all of their prospects, all of their customers, all of their deals in the system. So a lot of times it takes senior leadership only once in a while to interject, to get involved, to put their foot down, and to make it known that they are looking, they are watching what's going on. Um, you guys are funny. I'm just reading some of the comments, and you guys are very funny. Thank you. So, what we can do about it? So, let's say we're in a situation where, excuse me, let's say we're in a situation where we see that senior leadership is not involved. And we are doing everything that we can to gather the business requirements, to do the configuration, to review the configuration with the end users. And we're seeing that, like, nobody really seems to care about anything. And senior leadership doesn't seem to care about anything either. So I my personality is one where I believe in saying what I think and not to be rude or disrespectful to anyone, but call it for what it is, full transparency. And this is where I would turn to whoever is ultimately responsible for this particular project. So again, it could be the CEO of the business. It could be the sales manager, whoever budget this project is coming from, and basically having a private yet frank conversation with them saying, look, here's what I'm seeing. Like, things are not going right. And there's only so much I can do as the Salesforce admin in order to hold people accountable for doing whatever it is that's expected. So, what do you want to do, senior leader within the organization? And usually, 9 times out of 10, they will realize that they need to jump in. And it usually does not take much effort. It usually does not take much time. All it takes is a couple of sentences at the beginning of a meeting with everyone on the team where this person simply vents a little bit, the senior leader vents a little bit and basically says, look, we're spending a lot of time and a lot of money on Salesforce licenses, on this project, on getting add-ons and making sure everything is right. This is what we expect to be able to do once this project is done. There's a gap over here, and you guys need to bridge that gap. I'm out, but let me know if you have any questions or concerns on why you are not able to help bridge this gap on behalf of our organization. That's all it really takes. Typically, that senior leader within the organization knows how to do that. They do not need a script from you, but what they do need is for you to call out to them to say, hey, I need your help, senior leader. I need you to get involved and to help keep your people in line to make sure that this project is a success. Because otherwise, and by the way, just think of it from the perspective of a little bit of CYA from your perspective as the admin, where you're trying to cover yourself by having that senior leader jump in. You're basically giving them the warning that this train is about to crash. And you're seeing it at the early stages, and the senior leader can get involved and do something about it in order to avoid the crash. That's all it really is. And having that private conversation usually will go very, very far, not only in getting that senior leader aligned with you, but that leader will typically know exactly what to do, exactly how to communicate, exactly who to communicate with in order to get people in line. Okay, just taking note of some of the other comments that are coming in, flying in, I should say, a lot of really good stuff. Thank you. Okay, next up, reason number 3. This ties in very, very closely with the topic we talked about a moment ago. Lack of accountability. Now, this holds true at a lot of different levels. Let's get a little bit granular. Lack of accountability. When I say let's talk from a granular perspective, what does it look like with granularity? I've been in this situation a lot of times, and each time it makes my head explode. Asking people. So usually when I do business requirements gathering, let's say it's a brand new Salesforce implementation, a company that has never used Salesforce before. It does not matter if they are a small little startup of 2 people or it's a large enterprise organization. I usually try to have them focus on the business requirements gathering, on sharing their business processes from the earliest stages of like a prospect or a lead that gets introduced to them. So I usually start asking them, okay, talk to me about how you first find out about the existence of a brand new lead or prospect, and whether that person calls in or fills out a form on your website or stops by the trade show. pre-coronavirus, stops by your trade show booth and either you scan them in or they drop their business card in a fishbowl, whatever that is. Talk to me a little bit about that. And a lot of times, so I'm asking a relatively simple question. How do you get leads and prospects? And explain to me how that works. What does your employee do during those first few interactions? What pieces of information are they gathering from that lead or prospect? How do we know who to assign that lead or prospect to within our organization? So I'm asking, it's a very focused question. There were no forms in front of me. It's discussion. And I often turn to them to sort of help frame the scenario a little bit more. I turn to them and I say, make believe I am a brand new employee. Today's my first day on the job, and I am on this team. You might call it a business development team. You might call it a sales team. You might call it a lead generation team. I am a member of that team. What am I expected to do? So let's say someone calls in. What pieces of information am I expected to gather from this person? Where am I expected to put these pieces of information? How do I know if this is a dud or not a dud? How do I know who to hand it over to if the answer to certain questions is X versus Y? And what does lack of accountability look like in this scenario? It looks like the people that I'm asking the question to, they have absolutely no idea. They are the people who are responsible. Like I'm talking to the right people. Like it's not like I'm talking to customer service people. It's not like I'm talking to marketing people. I'm talking to the people in business development. And they have absolutely no idea. Or they give me conflicting information. They say the following. Well, when Susan does it, she uses this form. When Joe does it, he uses this Excel spreadsheet. And when Frank does it, he uses this Trello board. And Bob just keeps track of all of it in Outlook. And I turn to them and I say, okay, and there's differing pieces of information that each person is capturing. And I'm also, aside from the fact that they're using different tools to capture the data and to store the data, it sounds like they're all also using different processes. So if I'm the new employee, what is it that you want me to do? Which tool am I expected to use? Which questions am I expected to answer? And nobody knows. Because everyone basically says, yeah, everyone pretty much does their own thing. To me, that's a sign of lack of accountability. That's a horrible, horrible symptom. Because then no one can define, for you as a Salesforce admin, no one can define what fields belong in Salesforce on the lead. No one can define for you what lead assignment rules you should have. Nothing. And that you'll have similar situation where people like can't make a decision on various things, yet they're asking you to set up the configuration of the system to help support them. By the way, another way that this looks, very often this comes up in an entirely different way, but very, very common. Someone asks for some automation in Salesforce, and what they'll say is this. They'll say, hey, can you automate something for me in Salesforce where, let's say, when an opportunity needs attention, it should automatically flag the opportunity owner? Yeah, define what needs attention means based on what criteria. And they have absolutely no idea. Can you do me a favor? Can you pull a report of all of the prospects that we have in Salesforce? Sure. Since you're not using leads, you're using contacts and accounts. Based on what criteria do you want to define what is a prospect? Can you pull a report of all of our dormant customers so that we can reactivate them? Okay, how do we want to define dormant? Is it that we had an opportunity that was closed won within the last year, within the last 2 years, within the last 20 years? Like, what does that mean? And you don't get any answers. So it's fair to not get any answers if they need to think about it, and they did not give further thought to it. That's completely fair. But if you never get any answers, yet nobody's holding themselves accountable for defining anything that the business needs. That's a horrible, horrible sign. What can you do about it? Basically, you have to be pretty firm with them and essentially say, look, you need to give me more granularity that looks something like this. And without that, I can't move further on this. So I'm going to put this on the parking lot. We'll get back to it whenever it is that you're able to provide a little bit more clarity. I see there's a bunch of questions that are coming in, so let me go ahead and address them before I move on. So I need my old man reading glasses for this one. Give me 1 second. Uh, One potential trap is quoting a project based on an org specs when they are written too generally to be safe to use as the basis for a fixed quote. Too many, oh, by the way, maybe assume players somehow be implied by the general language. Yeah, so first of all, I apologize. I don't know why it's not showing your avatar, your face picture, and it says Facebook user. So I apologize about that. And it looks like it's going to happen for all of the comments. But I know exactly what you're talking about over here. So it's not particularly in line with this reason, but this is a problem, a very common problem. I will generalize this particular problem with fixed projects. Um, so this is speaking, this topic is more aligned with someone who's a Salesforce consultant slash admin, not necessarily someone who's a full-time. Well, I'll rephrase that. Here's what it looks like. The same topic. Excuse me. Here's what the same topic looks like for someone who is a full-time admin within, like a full-time employee within an internally within an organization. The fixed rate project looks something like this. Either senior leadership is basically telling you, here's this project and it needs to go live. Hey, we just signed a contract with Salesforce and it needs to go live by the following date. Can you do that? For a consultant, it's slightly different. For a consultant, it's not so much based on fixed time, but it's based on fixed dollar. Here's what we need with Salesforce. Hey, you're the admin. You've done this. You're the Salesforce consultant. You've done this a lot of times. How much will you charge for this? And based on what they're telling you, and by the way, the client, the customer, they will always describe their problem or their needs in Salesforce in the most rudimentary, simplistic way. They're going to make it seem like their data is perfectly clean. There are no data quality issues. They're going to make it seem like their business requirements are abundantly clear. All they need is to take their contacts and accounts out of this legacy system and put it into Salesforce. Boom, done. They make it seem like it's a 15-minute task and nothing more. And they ask you for a fixed rate on it. Either way, regardless of which scenario you might find yourself in as a full-time in-house Salesforce admin or as a Salesforce consultant who is presented with this scenario, my response is essentially run the other way. What I really mean by that is do not ever let yourself get put into that box, because that is a recipe for disaster the moment that you say yes to that. It is a complete recipe for disaster, because all it takes in either scenario, all it takes is for one person to say, just like, who was it that put it in the comments? I think it was Brandon who, no, it was not Brandon who said it. Okay, I can't catch it right now. Just like you put in the comments of there's another, oh, by the way, yes, there's always going to be more than one. There's going to be several, oh, by the ways, and all it takes is one, oh yeah, by the way, we've got this other database, or it's not even a database. It's notes in Outlook that they want you to convert, or a Microsoft Word document that contains tons of contacts that they're expecting you to import that unstructured junk data into Salesforce, and they expect you to perform magic on it. So I would never, ever agree to such a thing. In my mind, if you find yourself in this kind of situation, basically what I would do is, again, in the name of full transparency, I'll turn to the person and say, do you know exactly what it is that you're asking me to agree to? Can you specify with clarity, like the exact number of fields, of workflows, of process builders, of page layouts, of roles, of profiles, of permission sets, of record types? Can you specify all of those things right now today and sign off on them today before I say yes to this? And they can't. And usually they don't even know what a record type is. They don't know the difference between a field, a record, and an object. They have no idea. They don't know what the hell a process builder is. And you're asking them to sign off on that? And usually they'll respond by saying, no, I don't know any of that stuff. Well, guess what? I, as the admin or as the consultant, I have no clue what of any of those things you may or may not need. It's going to take weeks just to unpack and discover what it is that you truly do need. So how on earth can I sign up for something where you don't even know yourself exactly what you're asking me to sign up for? To me, it's really as simple as that. Let me take a look at some of the other comments that have come in. Um, I see there's this comment right over here. In this post-COVID environment, I should just keep my reading glasses on. How do we get the same interaction that we would have gotten if we locked down the team in a room for a week? It's hard to make everyone is actively participating and not multitasking. So this is definitely very true. Um, it's hard. It's definitely hard. What I typically do is I will, let's say we're talking about gathering business requirements. I will do this as a Zoom meeting where I am sharing my screen. And on the screen, basically what I have is I start off with pretty much a blank like Google Doc or a blank Evernote note. Excuse me. When I say blank, it's not truly blank. I have a bulleted list of like the topics that I want to cover, meaning like sales. What is the sales process? How is it being done today? What tools or systems are being done today? What are the current pain points associated with the sales process today? Things like that, just reminders for myself, really not so different from like the bullet points I'm showing you on the screen right now. Just high level bullet points where the rest of the document is meant to clarify. So as the team is talking, they are watching as I'm capturing notes. So if they are simply venting among each other about how much they hate the other system or how much they hate Salesforce and they don't ever want to move to Salesforce, they're still watching me listening with a blank screen. I have no notes whatsoever. And I'm like, I wait for them to finish. I'm like, okay, so what are the requirements here? What system are you using today? What is the process that you do today as it relates to, working, let's say, deals in a pipeline? So let's say, I'm an employee on your team and talking to the customer. Here are the products and services that we offer. Here's the pricing. And they say, yeah, I'm interested. Where am I supposed to capture any of that? Can anyone elaborate? And if there's radio silence, like, and sometimes this happens where there's complete there's radio silence because everyone is multitasking, then I'm like, okay, I guess we're not doing any of this in Salesforce because none of you can elaborate for me on what the requirements are. Let's move on to the next topic. And let's say, okay, we're skipping over sales. Now we're talking about, let's say, managing of marketing campaigns, where campaigns could be mass email distributions. It could be campaigns of webinars, trade shows, networking events, anything like that. And we'll just move on to the next topic. That's the document that I then later walk over to or digitally reach out to the senior leader within the organization and say, look, we need to talk. I had a meeting with your team about what their requirements are as it relates to Salesforce for managing their pipeline. You see these blank notes over here? I've got nothing from them. So it's getting the senior leader involved to shake the tree a little bit and to show them this is really important. I personally have found that by like having it as a Zoom meeting and just sharing that blank screen of notes. And by the way, as I'm sharing the blank screen of notes, very often someone will be like, well, here's the Excel spreadsheet that we're using today. Here's how we do it today in the system that we're moving off of. Here's how we do it today in Salesforce, but it sort of sucks for us and we need your help to make it better. And fine, I stop sharing my screen, they share their screen. I'm recording that Zoom meeting, I'm capturing screenshots as they're showing it to me. I'm writing down notes of the pain points that they are elaborating on. And this way I bring it all back once they're done sharing their screen, I bring it back, to my screen where they can see the notes that I've captured. I want to have full transparency where they can see, here's what I've extrapolated from all of the conversation that we've had so far. And usually that helps tremendously to get the right people involved. Now, at the same time, still can't help it. It's sort of like the nature of the beast, where people are distracted, they're multitasking, they're on Zoom, they're not sharing their cameras, they're muted, they're completely not engaged whatsoever. In the end, it does become apparent. It becomes apparent to you as a Salesforce admin where these people are completely not engaged. It ends up making the project far more simplistic. And then later you turn back to the team when they say, hey, how come the system doesn't work because we don't have all of these other pieces of information that we need to track in the system. We don't have a place to put them. Dude, remember when we had these meetings? Here are the notes from the meetings. Here's the recording from the meeting. And you had nothing to say. So I wouldn't wait until the last minute. That's where I would jump in. I would get senior leadership involved, basically say, look, here are the bare bones business requirements. They've got nothing for me. They're completely not engaged. They're silent. They're not answering any questions. They're not telling me what they need. I'm happy to do whatever they want, but they're not elaborating for me. You have to call that out. Anyway, I hope that helps. I think that was Diamond who asked that question. Uh, it is hard keeping up with all the comments. No, it was Brandon. Brandon Smith asked that question. Okay, let's see what other questions we have over here. Nicholas says one potential. Here we go. So again, I apologize that it's not showing your name, Nicholas. One potential trap is quoting a project based on org specs. Oh, this is the same question I looked at before. It was you, Nicholas. Sorry, I jumped ahead, so I didn't see some of the other stuff that happened later. Okay, let's see some of the other questions over here before I move on to the next. Okay, Nicholas, excellent point. Hold on, let me bring it up over here. So, yes, this is to follow up on the fixed hours versus the fixed quote versus managing a project based on hours. Let's go back to the scenario I described before, where the client basically says, look, our needs are so very simplistic, and this is all it entails. I'll turn to them and I'll say, and sometimes they're completely, no pun intended, fixated on having a fixed bid project. I'll turn to them and I'll say, look, based on everything that you described, if I were to take it very literally, it sounds to me like this is a fill in the blank. 10-hour project, 15-hour project, 25-hour project, 50-hour project, whatever it is. It's a project that is X number of hours. You want a fixed project? Okay, I'm going to give it to you. It's actually going to be hourly. It's fixed in terms of the number of hours that you're going to get out of my time in order to make this project happen. If everything that you described right now in terms of your business requirements, if they are accurate and they completely entail all of the requirements that you have as an organization as it relates to this project and this platform, then you're completely good. You have nothing to worry about. This project should be completely done within X number of hours, whatever it is that I'm estimating it to be. However, if you do go over those hours because you're like, oh yeah, we forgot about all these other things that we need as well. Didn't you understand that? No, I had no way of understanding that. I never would have quoted it for 25 hours if I would have known this. Well, now you're going way above and beyond whatever that X number of hours was, and now you're charging them hourly. And it's because of their ideas, their suggestions, their business requirements that they have introduced into the mix. So that's how I typically handle those situations, but even more so, I prefer to completely avoid anything that looks like a fixed project. What I will do is if the client insists that what their requirements are super, super small, what they need is very, very small, then I'll be like, okay, fine, that's totally cool. Go ahead and let's go ahead and simply do it as an hourly project, and I'm going to set up the contract so it's only 15 hours. If it's really not that big of a deal, you should be completely cool with that. And if we use up the 15 hours and it's not entirely done, well, you used up the hours. What do you want me to do? So that's how I typically handle the situations. I see there's a question over here where we have, how do you deal with clients who are always micromanaging and always complaining, even for minor issues? This is a really good question. So what I typically do is I will turn to them and I will say, look, and I try to say this in the most polite and respectful way, if you think you know better on how to manage this project, if you think you know the Salesforce platform better, if you think you know your business requirements better than the way the team has articulated it to me, let me step aside. You go ahead and you don't need me. Because if you know everything better, I'm not contributing any value to your team or this project. So I will step aside. You go do whatever it is that you want. And after you create your Frankenstein, come back to me if you need my help fixing it. Because guess what? It's going to be a much larger project at that point. Now, that's if the micromanaging is coming from the perspective of either distrust, or I'll go back to the phrase bullying, or ego. And those things happen a lot. What happens less often, which also appears like micromanaging, is where someone is just by their nature, they simply can't help it. They need to be involved, or they're super curious about the system, about the Salesforce platform, about how you go about capturing the business requirements, how you go about configuring the system. So again, because it takes a level of confidence to be able to do this, I will turn to the client and say, look, you want for complete transparency, you want me to actually do the configuration with you looking over my shoulder? That's fine. It's actually going to take a whole lot longer because as you ask questions, it's going to take a whole lot longer for me to create these fields and to set them up on the page layout because I'm describing every blessed thing, so it can easily inflate the amount of time it'll take to actually do the project by 2 or 3 times over. But if that's what you prefer, that's fine. If you want to be able to see all of the notes that we have in the status for everything, it's going to take more time for you as the admin to go ahead and create all of that level of detailed documentation and then share it with those people. They will probably not have the time to actually consume all of those pieces of information, but sometimes that's the other approach that I take, where I see that like they're really not trying to impose their opinion. They're not trying to say, do it my way. They simply want full transparency into the inner workings of how you're doing the project. So what I personally do is I try to use every system that I use for like capturing notes and business requirements and tracking the status of things. I'm using cloud-based tools. They're all cloud-based tools. So if I truly need to give access to my client to see that level of detail, usually they do not want to see it. They do not care. One element is simply a matter of trust. The other thing is the reason why they asked me to help is because they want to spend their time doing other things, not micromanaging me. Anyway, that's my take on that. All right, let's move along because we have a couple of others to talk about. And I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit here. So reason number 4, insufficient communication. This not only ties in with like what I was saying before about you're trying to gather business requirements and people aren't, they're multitasking, they're distracted in Zoom, etc. Sometimes insufficient communication can look like a lot of other things. Insufficient communication can also look like people who are not sharing with you their fears, their concerns, their struggles as it relates to the maybe internal politics within their organization, or their struggles with the data quality issues that they have within their organization, or the fears that they have of moving from another system onto the Salesforce platform, or moving from Classic into Lightning. So having open lines of communication, knowing how to extract these pieces of information, that feedback from other people, is a challenge. it definitely is a challenge. It's even more of a challenge when we're all working remote. So, my recommendation on this is to try to hone in on your own communication skills. There's only so much you can control of how much other people are willing to share or not share. It's only so much you can do. But at the very least, you can make sure that your own communication skills are up to par so that when you find yourself in this kind of situation, you know how to reach out to the other person and basically say, hey, look, you are the sales leader. And when I ask about like managing the pipeline, like I'm not hearing from anyone on your team or from you in terms of what your business requirements are. Like, what's the deal? I'm expecting to hear a whole lot more. Like, what's going on? So using different forms, different tone of voice, different words, having that right communication is key. And each person's individual style of communication is a little bit different, let alone the interaction between people and how they interact with each other, how well they get along with each other, how well they feel comfortable sharing. Well, here's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that I don't want to give you all of the details because I'm concerned that, let's say, you're going to steal my business. I'm concerned that your other team members are going to see the data that they're not expected to see. Oh, you could have told me that. That's really not a big deal. You don't have to worry. Here's why. You don't have to worry about that. So we can take care of that. So there's a lot that goes into communication. Um, Insufficient communication can be a complete disaster to any project. Okay, let's move on. No plan or timeline or inaccurate estimates. This goes back, by the way, to one example of this. Ties back to the topics we talked about a couple of minutes ago as it relates to fixed projects. But that's not by any means the only example. No plan or timeline also means, let's say you're talking to members of the team and you're asking them, okay, when is it that you expect to give me your requirements of, let's say, how you plan on handling customer support tickets. When customer support tickets come in, what attributes you care to track? When is it that you're going to give it to me? Yeah, I think I'll get it to you by the end of the week. And if week comes, yeah, didn't really get to it, maybe next week. Next week comes, yeah, maybe I'll get it to you end of the quarter. Like, hello, we got to move here. Like, what's going on? And basically, you have to turn to them. It's one thing, be a little bit of a nag, be a little bit of a cohort by turning to them saying, look, I want to help you. Like, give me at least bare bones. Maybe if we do this as a working session and for 1 hour and whatever the output is after that 1 hour, let's just use that as a starting point, perhaps. So having like no timeline, having no follow up with various things, or unrealistic timelines, unrealistic expectations on how long it'll take for other people to do things or for you to get things back is can be a huge disaster for any project. A lot of times, all it takes is a lot of these things go back to communication, going back, following up with the person that you're having that struggle with in terms of timeline, in terms of the follow up, in terms of the unrealistic expectations. I thought it's going to be this, and you thought it's going to be that, and we have to try to bring ourselves onto the same page. Having that open conversation with them usually will help resolve many, many of these issues. Not necessarily all of them, but at least it'll help you bring it to the table and to have an open discussion about it in private. In other words, everyone else on the team does not need to be part of these discussions. All right, let's move on. Next, lack of user testing or failure to address feedback. So these are two sides of the same coin. Lack of user testing. You as the Salesforce admin, you go ahead and you build stuff and you are asking the team to go ahead and test it out before we actually, quote unquote, go live. What do we mean by that? Well, if it's a brand new instance of Salesforce, you're doing the configuration directly in the production org. No data is in there yet. No users are actively using it yet. So you're going out and you're building everything directly in a brand new production instance, and the team is logging in, and you are training the team on how to go about doing the testing. And you see that they have not logged in. Or you see that they logged in and they haven't tested anything. Or they claim they tested things and they have absolutely no feedback whatsoever. That's a real problem. What is the reverse side of that? They actually go ahead and either they do the testing or they you do a walkthrough for them and they're giving you feedback and they're telling you, here's what I'd like to have, here's the struggles that I see, here are the challenges that I see with what you just showed me. And you hear them, but you're not doing anything. You're not responding to them. You're not taking action on any of the things that they followed up with you on. That is a complete breakdown right there of communication. Because the message that you're getting across to the users that you're trying to get feedback from is, I don't really care. I'm just doing it anyway. Now, by the way, I'm not at all telling you do whatever it is that they want. Address it in some way, whether it means, okay, go ahead and do it, or maybe asking them for some more clarification, or turning to them saying, I think that's a great idea, but senior leadership did not buy into that whatsoever. So like, I can't do anything about that right now. Or turning to them saying, listen, the scope of this first project is only to do X, Y, and Z. And what you're talking about, which I think is completely brilliant, and I'm willing to bet that the rest of the team can benefit from it too. There's no way that we can increase the scope of our first project or this project to include it. So just letting you know, I put it on a list to revisit this issue once this phase is done, once this project is done. That's what that feedback looks like. Now, what happens when, hang on one second, just looking over here at some of the comments that came in. I want to be mindful of all of these comments. So basically what I do is lack of user testing. This goes back to what I mentioned before, the communication. If you're asking the team to go ahead and test things, you set things up and you're asking them to play around with it, and you see that they're really not doing anything. Hopefully you have senior leadership involved. Hopefully you can reach out to senior leadership and say, here's some of the frustrating or troubling elements that I'm seeing as it relates to our project. We went ahead and we built this whole thing for this team member who asked for it. We asked them to test it, and we're not seeing anything. Like, they're not saying it's great. And by the way, it's not that we're looking for a compliment. We just want confirmation before we actually go live that what we configured is actually in sync, matches the expectations of what the business actually needs. And either they did zero testing or they did minimal testing. But we, as the Salesforce admins, as the project managers here, I do not feel comfortable that adequate testing has been done so that everyone is covered, so that everyone looks good when this project actually go live. So everyone looks good when we actually do end user tests, end user training to teach everyone on the team of here's what the system will look like. So that's how we can, that's what it looks, that's what the situation looks like, and that's how we can handle it. So let me call out some other comments over here. Wouldn't you want dedicated testers in that scenario? So the answer is yes, but sometimes even having dedicated testers, they're not logging in and they're not doing anything. And sometimes you're even giving them documentation of, here is the test script. Go to the following screen, click on the following thing, do the following, enter the following values into the following fields, and hit save, and here's what you're expected to see. And you go in and you see they haven't done anything. They're not giving you any documentation. They're not telling you here, like, here are the errors that we saw, or all of these succeeded. Nothing. Yes, I've worked on many projects where we've gone to granular level of detail of creating documentation, of checking in with the testers, and they just don't do it. So it could be a real struggle. I find a lot of the improvements come after deployment when in the practical environment. This is entirely true, and this is to be expected. So, by the way, I'm going to put a twist on reason number 6, and I'm actually experiencing something like this right now myself on an active project, and I believe some employees at that client are actually on this live stream right now. We actually went ahead and did a rather simplistic Salesforce configuration and doing the end user training. And while I'm doing end user training, especially for a new implementation, I always I always expect a lot of questions. I expect a lot of concerns. I expect a lot of this, where the people on the team have been using something else that they're comfortable with. They are not excited to use Salesforce. They feel that using Salesforce is sort of like Big Brother. The boss wants to see what they're doing. The boss wants to replace them. The boss wants to micromanage them. They don't want to learn something new. They just want to be closing deals the way they've been closing deals before, or maybe sliding under the radar. So I'm usually greeted, especially like pre-coronavirus, when doing training in a classroom style. I'm usually greeted with arms folded, and everyone on the team, especially the more successful senior sales reps, I'm greeted with basically, I know that they want to throw a tomato at my head. I completely know that. So nonetheless, while I'm doing the training, I expect a lot of engagement from these people. Why? Because even for the naysayers, even the people who hate the system, while I'm doing end user training, I expect them to throw their challenges at me, saying, okay, great. So I put in the task over there. How am I going to know when the task is due? How am I going to find it? How am I going to know if the task was not due? How do I know if maybe my colleague has been calling on the same customer as mine? How do I know that? How do I know that my colleague is not going to be able to see the deals that I'm logging in the system? That's what I get confronted with. I love those kinds of questions. It allows me to answer them. It allows me to address those concerns, the frustrations that the end users have. And I would not necessarily otherwise even think to spend that much time talking about, let's say, the security model of who sees what within the system, of doing a login as the other user to show them, here, if I log in as you and I create an opportunity, now I'm going to log in as your colleague. And now, boom, you see, I can't even see that opportunity exists. I can't even see that that customer exists. So it allows me to go in that other direction. So let's go back to this particular project that I'm working on right now. So it was a rather simplistic rudimentary Salesforce implementation, nothing crazy whatsoever, doing end user training, and it doesn't matter what topic I'm covering on end user training, crickets. Nothing. Nobody has any questions. Nobody has any concerns. Nobody says, oh, wait a minute. We also want to track the following piece of information when it comes to prospects or customers or deals. And what about this? Someone forgot about that. How do we do that? Nope. Nobody's asking any of that. And yes, I've called this out with senior leadership, saying here's a problem that I've been seeing. Here's how it's manifesting itself. Here's my concern. I don't think they're actually engaged. I don't think they care to use the system. I can't force them to fall in love with the system. In the end, my goal is really to not even, I don't care to have them fall in love with the system. But if as a company you're investing the time, the money, the licensing for the Salesforce licenses, for my time, the cost associated with me to configure the system of doing the end user training, it seems like it's all going to be a waste because these people are just not engaged. And this is where, again, going back to the things we talked about before, senior leadership gets involved. Senior leadership basically shakes the tree, turns to them and basically explains to them, listen, starting whatever day, you're expected to have all of your data in here. This is how you're going to get compensated based on the data that you're putting in here. You're managing your pipeline in Excel. None of those deals are you going to get compensated for. You're only going to get compensated for the deals that are tracked in Salesforce. So sometimes it takes things like that in order to get everyone back on track. All right, let's look at the next. I was going to press the wrong thing. What the hell am I clicking on? So this is the next item is solving the wrong problem. I can't tell you how many times client is asking, maybe because they saw a YouTube video about a particular feature that Salesforce has, and they want to focus on that one non-consequential, irrelevant feature. And they're super excited about it, and they want to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy on something completely nonsensical, such as maybe having things color-coded in Salesforce, having graphics that represent the different stages of a particular deal or the priority of a particular case, or an icon that represents the industry that the company is in. And a lot of times, so what does this look like? It looks like business folks that are asking for a lot of time and a lot of attention to be focused on essentially nonsense, on things that will have zero impact on productivity or efficiency or data quality. But it's kind of cool frosting on the cake. Now, as a technology geek, yeah, I think it's very cool to be able to do things like that. But at the same time, what problem is this solving? What what efficiency is this going to introduce into the system and or into your day-to-day work process? And if it's not going to solve a problem, what the hell are we wasting our time on it for? Like it makes no sense. So this happens all the time. And by the way, as whether you're again full-time in-house Salesforce admin or you are an external consultant, if you find yourself falling into this trap where you're expected to follow up with all of these inconsequential things, what's going to happen over time after days, weeks, months? Someone, whoever it is that's paying your salary, is going to turn to you and say, what the hell have we been paying for? For you to make icons so that if they're in the hospitality industry, it should have this icon, and if they're in the medical industry, it should have that icon. Like, what the heck? No, like this makes no sense. They're going to say bye-bye to you. So you don't want that to happen. So what do you need to do about it? You basically need to call things out and essentially get the senior leaders within the organization to help shift the priorities of the different things that you're being asked to do so that these non-consequential, silly things fall to the very bottom of the priority list, or they are taken out of the list altogether so that the things that you are working on have the biggest impact within the organization, that you're introducing efficiencies, that you're solving problems within the organization on the Salesforce platform. Anyway, that's really it in terms of those are the key reasons why I've seen those are the key reasons why Salesforce projects typically fail and how to solve for them. I realize that we're a little bit past the top of the hour. I was hoping to actually wind up at the top of the hour. Just looking to see, I don't see any other questions or anything, so we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I hope you stay well and healthy and wash your hands, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.